thanks everybody for joining us for our Lunch and Learn. If you want to grab lunch, feel free on a virtual basis, but hopefully we will keep you entertained, and we'd love for this to be interactive. So please use the Q&A function. Actually, no, I should say the chat function, because that'll allow us to have a bit more of an interactive conversation so everybody else can see other entries. And yeah, feel free to kind of get that rolling so we can kind of share thoughts along the way. But again, as you probably know, because you've made it this far, this is a deep dive on the report that we've done on Georgia's fintech ecosystem. My name is Glen Sarvady. I'm one of the co-authors of the report, along with Don Campbell and Reese Porter. And we've assembled a panel of individuals who have, I think, two very valuable kind of contributions here. One, they each contributed to the report itself in the form of a contributed article explaining their perspective on the Georgia ecosystem. And they also represent, I think, a great cross-section of how the overall ecosystem plays out. So very quickly, and then we'll let them speak individually to their backgrounds. Jonathan Godby is a professor of finance at Georgia State University and is heavily involved in the Georgia FinTech Academy. So he is, as everyone knows, talent development is critical to any ecosystem. We know the number of resources we need to plug in to keep the vibrant ecosystem running. And that's not only from a tech coding standpoint, but also from other skill sets that plug into fintech, entrepreneurship, product management, et cetera, et cetera. Jane O'Sullivan is from Enterprise Ireland, and she can speak to the international appeal of companies who come to create their US presence in Atlanta. And she's got a couple of great success stories from her own operations within the Enterprise Ireland initiative. Kristin Slink is kind of our designated entrepreneur on this panel. She's a serial entrepreneur herself, and I'll let her talk about that a bit more. She also was the FinTech catalyst at ATDC until recently, when she moved off to her latest ventures. I think you got a couple things cooking, as I recall, Kristin. The one that we've got you down listed here is Tech AF, which is helping other founders really find their path to communicating their message and getting off the ground with their startups. And Jagruti Solanki, again, a really interesting career path and a really valuable perspective. She is currently the chief financial officer at BitPay, but she came into the space, actively looked to get into the fintech space as an auditor, got a chance to look, on the ground floor inside some of these companies by being their professional and certified auditor, and then wound up changing sides and moving directly into this operation. So thanks to all of you for joining us. And let's continue on real quickly, if you would, Jessica. Real quick, I also want to remind everybody, if you want to take a picture of this screen, you can get the mini URL we've got at the bottom. One of our most popular events that we put together as the FinTech Society at TAG is our annual Welcome to Atlanta Mixer. This one's taking place on September 28th. It says Midtown Atlanta here, but I will tell you that it's actually at the rooftop patio of Nelson Mullins up in Atlantic Station. So it's kind of an inside-outside space. Late September, kind of it's sun, toward the end of the day, is a wonderful setting to be doing this. We tend to get a pretty darn good crowd for these, about 100 people. It's mostly a networking event, but just again, a sampling. And this is not a full listing. We'll probably have one or two more. And there's a lot of other companies. We may even be doing another one of these early next year because they're so popular. Companies that have expanded or established a presence in Georgia recently. So we've got some names here that you probably know and some names that you don't. And then they'll be just giving a few comments very quickly about what they see as the keys to the Georgia space. But more importantly, it's a chance to get together with your colleagues. So hope you'll make plans to join us on September 28th. And as I say, that bit.ly at the bottom of the screen will get you to the registration page. We currently have early bird pricing out there, which expires this Friday night. So if I can give you a little added inducement to do it soon, that would be a good reason. So on to the main attraction. Now, the main attraction is not me. The main attraction is the panel. I'm just going to go very quickly through these two slides. This is the cover of the report. It is available online at we make it easy to get there. GeorgiaFintech.org will actually route you to the FinTech Society page of the Technology Association of Georgia. Once you get there, you can go to resources and find a PDF of the report. Or again, we've got this bit.ly tag that'll take you directly to the PDF. If anybody is interested in getting a hard copy, you can drop me a note. I'm sure you can find me online, and we'll figure out a way to get that to you. We've got plenty of copies. It's about a 24-page report, if I'm not mistaken, with a lot of great information. But more importantly, we do this kind of as a labor of love every year or two, but the information is always changing and always changing in a positive way. So by going to the website, we keep it updated on a regular basis. The number of companies, and we'll get to that in a minute, transactions that are taking place, both mergers, acquisitions, capital raises, IPOs, things along those lines. And again, we'll be talking about some of the most recent ones. So encourage you to go out. If you haven't seen the report yet, that's a great way to get it. And as I say, if you'd like a hard copy, just drop a note to Tag or me and we'll get it to you. So a couple of the headline kind of attractions in the ecosystem of things I think make us kind of very distinctive overall in the country. Everybody's probably heard about Transaction Alley already. That's the way we have portrayed ourselves, because within fintech, we have a specific focus on the payment side of businesses. That tends to be kind of where we have our core strength. And what you'll find is if you look at the companies that have significant presence in Georgia, they're responsible for roughly 2/3 of all payments transactions, not only in the US, but also more broadly, a lot of international presence as well, because of companies name things like Global Payments. You can figure out that they actually go outside the US. At the time, this is another example of how quickly the information changes. At the time we published the report, we had 210 companies listed in the Georgia ecosystem. We're already up to 218. Some of those are new companies moving in, some of them are just forming. Others, quite frankly, we continue to find new ones that have been out there all along that we just were not aware of. And and if anybody knows of others that they don't see on our list, please let us know. 183 of them are private, 35 are public. Not all of those are technically headquartered in Georgia, but they all have a very significant presence in Georgia. And of course, one that makes the Chamber of Commerce and the political side of things very happy is that represents over 42,000 jobs. And that number, again, is growing quickly. There is, on a reported basis, and this is not our number, this is coming from these companies, some major companies who, most of which actually already had some level of presence in Georgia, but they've actually expanded their presence here, specifically in Atlanta, to tap into our diversity and our growing fintech ecosystem. So Visa, BlackRock, Apple, Capital One, and Square, in particular, the piece of block that actually deals with payments once again. They have all made announcements that account for an additional 5,000 jobs that are going to be brought here over the course of the next 2 to 3 years. And then if you only look at the last, well, not even 8 months just yet, in this year, the activity going on is, the mergers and acquisitions, the funding events. People talk about the fact that things have slowed down in the venture capital space because of the drop in a lot of tech valuations. At the early stages, we have not seen that to be the case. I think it's the very large valuations and the big kind of later round events that have slowed down. But we've seen over nearly $500 million in venture funding already this year in 2022 in Atlanta, which is not in Georgia, which is not a meaningful change from the last couple of years. We're pretty much humming along at the highs that we've established the last couple of years. And Jagruti, we'll get back to this one a little bit later. I think that one of the most recent transactions, again, it's so kind of hot off the presses that it, again, did not make it into our printed report, is a company called Bitcoin Depot that you may know in town, is going public via a SPAC. And again, we'll talk about that. Valued, not quite unicorn level, but 885 million is pretty darn close. So those are just some kind of key points. You'll find a whole lot more of it in the report if you take a look, both online or in print. And with that, why don't we move on to the question component of, I've got a few prepared comments or thoughts I want to bounce off of each of our panelists. But then from there, again, I said earlier, please use the chat function. Let us know what else is on your mind. We'd love to kind of work this in and make it as interactive as possible. But Kristin, let me start with you. As I mentioned, you're kind of our designated entrepreneur, having done this a couple of different times. Your first company, I believe it was your first, was the one that actually wound up bringing you to Atlanta, called Loan Hero. And it was when you actually sold the company that you relocated from San Diego and decided you liked it here and stuck around. So can you say a bit about that journey, and then also how that helped to kind of inspire and inform your move into your current gig?
Yeah, absolutely. And first and foremost, great putting this panel together. It's super diverse of all of our different backgrounds. So I think this is going to be a really exciting conversation. I also see a lot of friendly names in the attendees. So please make it interactive, ask questions, join in. and let us know what you want to hear. So a little bit about me, technically right, Glenn, actually Loan Hero was an acquisition of a consulting business that I had. Just a bit about me. I'm not technical and don't come from finance. I ended up in fintech through a consulting business that I started where I really got into what we now know as buy now, pay later before it was even a thing. So I like to say I'm an OG in that space. Long story short, I took that consulting business. It got acquired into a venture-backed startup called Loan Hero. We were a centralized platform, really lender ourselves, working with additional lenders to provide a streamlined experience for merchants offering financing at the point of sale. We built that company after raising 55 million, ended up selling it to, as you said, a company based here in Georgia. And so that brought me out 4 years ago. Since selling the company, I've really been spending most of my time with fintech companies, particularly early stage. So I always say I'm the fintech early stage advocate here in our community. So I really got a good glimpse about how fintech companies are getting off the ground, particularly here in Atlanta. Most specifically, I really got an inside look about how fintechs and banks work together, which is a theme and something that I love to talk about. And so being at ATDC, working, in that capacity, I really saw a gap for non-technical founders at that early stage, not getting access to the funding that they needed. So that's what I'm doing with Tech AAF, and that's kind of where my heart and soul is now. But I am still involved in fintech in regards to my consulting business. So I'm actually right now getting a really fun glimpse of being a fintech liaison for a local bank here. And I'm helping them through a fintech project. So I'm helping really kind of communicate between the bank and the fintech to make sure that's a smooth transaction. So that's a little bit about me. Thanks for having me today.
And thank you for coming. And I will vouch for the fact, as Kristin said, I think that as far as a fintech advocate and champion, especially for the younger startup companies, I can't think of a better voice that we have here, which is just wonderful. And another thing I'll just mention about the report is when we look at funding opportunities, we try, there's a lot of things going on at the very small angel round level. You find, there's $250,000, $500,000 events. We can't even keep track of all those. We tend to try to, catch anything that's $3 million and up and report on it. And frankly, the headlines are the ones like Bitcoin Depot, $885 million valuation. There's other ones, and one of your companies, Jane Wayflyer, had I think it was 100 million. I forget the exact number of a raise over the course of the last year. But frankly, the ones that I really find the most fascinating to track on a regular basis are the $3, $4, $5 million ones, because that really tells you what's bubbling up behind the scenes. And there's several. Keep Financial is another one that comes to my mind. It's the founders of Cabbage, and it's their next show. So they just launched and came out of stealth mode. I think it was in June this year, and they announced a $9 million round, which is going to kind of get them to the next stage. And you probably saw their name on the list. They'll be one of the Welcome to Atlanta companies because they've established their presence here. Jagruti, can you say a bit about your path? Because I just find it fascinating. I'm not sure how, and as Kristin pointed out, she's not technically oriented. I'm not sure how much of your technical background, but obviously you have an accounting background, and then that led you into a journey into joining BitPay, which is one of the brand names I'd say at this point in the ecosystem.
Yeah, thanks Glenn for having me here, and good chatting with all of you guys here. So yeah, I guess in terms of my journey, I joined a top-tier CPA firm based here in Atlanta called Aprio about 14 years back. So really started my career with the company, and I guess over time I made an audit partner, and in my tenure with Aprio for about 12 years, I would say probably half of my career, the latter half, I decided to focus on technology companies, and fintech really was kind of the main one. So fintech, software, SaaS, that started becoming a bigger chunk of what I was doing in the audit assurance and financial reporting space. Happened to, get on the audit of BitPay way back when, 7-8 years back, when I was still a junior audit manager at the company. And I'll be honest, my journey in the blockchain space really started with BitPay and learning what these guys were doing. Pretty fascinating, exciting, and honestly, I started as a skeptic, not knowing what digital asset was to begin with. Fast forward, I joined BitPay as their CFO about 18 to 19 months back. in that time period, I had a chance to work with several dozen crypto companies. I've seen the ICO bubble. I've seen a lot of companies who have, I guess, who started, and some of them don't exist anymore, just, based on how things worked at that point. But I had the opportunity to work with a lot of companies, advise them on reporting, what gap accounting means, what they can do to improve their internal controls, and got pretty fascinated with the whole space in general, outside of just providing advice to companies, and figured, I'll kind of make the change and deep dive into blockchain while I could. So hence, my journey started with BitPay. BitPay, they're the largest crypto payment processing company, venture backed. It's about 11 years old. Probably the oldest crypto company. I think we beat Coinbase by maybe a few months here or there, and based in Atlanta. So very much proud, to be a Georgia company.
Which again kind of ties to what we talked about before. When we think about Bitcoin or crypto assets in general, you've got the investment aspect and the means of exchange aspect. And I've always been interested in the payment side. So probably not a coincidence that the payments piece of Bitcoin is sitting here in Atlanta. Am I remembering the story correctly? You actively sought out the opportunity to be on the BitPay engagement, didn't you? I seem to recall that you already kind of established some interest there.
I did. I remember begging to the partner on the job. I just wanted him to put me on the account just because I was super curious and, didn't know what the space entailed. So I'm very glad that happened. And my partners at the firm gave me the opportunity and, trusted me to handle it.
And here we are. Jane, like I said before, I know you've got a couple of really great success stories. I'd love for you to kind of just talk about what Enterprise Ireland's mission is. Talk about maybe a bit about what do you think the most attractive features of the Atlanta market are for companies establishing a US presence? And then if you would, you mentioned, I believe you've got a couple of unicorns here. So I'd love to kind of hear about that.
Yeah, so, well, firstly, thank you for having me and thank you for including Enterprise Ireland. We're delighted to be involved. So I suppose Enterprise Ireland is the trade development arm of the Irish government. So we would have a sister agency called IDA Ireland, who have actually been in Atlanta for over 20 years, and they would support American companies and FDI into Ireland, and then we would support Irish companies expanding to international markets. So I think we're actually top 10 sources of FDI into Georgia as a country now, in Ireland. But essentially my role is to support Irish firms who are looking to expand into the US market in the fintech and financial services sector. So we've had great success in Atlanta and Georgia, and I think a huge part of that has been the likes of TAG, Metro Atlanta Chamber, Fintech Atlanta, the Fintech Academy. The whole ecosystem is so incredibly well connected and very supportive of each other, and that has allowed us to, I suppose, extend our ability to support the companies overseas as they're sourcing new information, sourcing funding, as they're researching where to establish themselves. Atlanta has been incredibly supportive and very welcoming as a city and as a region, I suppose. In terms of our success stories, obviously Wayflyer, they had a $150 million raise earlier this year. So they are a unicorn and they're headquartered in Atlanta. But we've quite a strong history actually, from the Irish side, I think in the wider Atlanta, Georgia region. Kerry Group opened a plant this summer, $137 million plant with 250 people, not a fintech or financial services company, but still huge. And we've had a consulate there for 12 years. Queevany Croher is our consul general there. So I think the ties between Ireland and the US always get plugged in as being Chicago, New York, that kind of thing. But we actually do have quite strong connections to the Southeast, and it's something that we're definitely trying to grow as well. But I think it's the groups in Atlanta and the supporters, and Kristin, I know you've been a supporter for years, that have really helped us to, I suppose, drive our companies to establish themselves there. And it's all scales of companies. Like we have Wayflyer, unicorn, but we have much smaller companies who are starting off, whose maybe product or service is best suited for a larger market. And there has been no discrepancy in the level of enthusiasm and outreach and everything from the groups in Atlanta. So it's been an absolute pleasure, honestly, to to work with everybody here. And I think that's a huge draw to the area for us.
And there's another, is it Phineas? I believe you have another unicorn that's got strong Atlanta presence.
They have a strong Atlanta presence as well. Yeah, insurance software platform with an end-to-end solution. Yes, so we'd also be in Atlanta, and I've like a huge company, hugely successful, like a wonderful success rate for Ireland as well. And yeah, it's we're very proud to have such success in the area.
Obviously, we're happy to have you.
Thank
Jonathan,
you.
obviously these companies don't run without talent. And I think from my understanding, Georgia Fintech Academy is pretty unique in terms of what we've done. And I've seen just recently some pretty darn impressive numbers of, the number of students that are coming through your courses and, graduating with FinTech concentrations. Can you say a bit about, the trajectory and the mission of Georgia Fintech Academy?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Glenn. You're right. It's a very innovative program, and that's one of the things I really love about it. But just for a few quick numbers, this fall we have 836 students in about 19 different classes. Last year, fiscal year 2022, we had 590 students do projects with 10 different companies, and I'll talk more about those later. We had about over 700 placements out of our FinTech courses. I think what really makes us unique is, and the reason I really like to be involved, this is not a standard way of teaching things. And shout out to Tommy Marshall, our executive director. He's given us a lot of freedom and a lot of help to do some innovative things. One is an event series, and tomorrow night, Raphael Bostic, the president of Atlanta Fed, is going to come speak to the Georgia Fintech Academy. You can go to georgiafintechacademy.org, and if you want to attend that in person, hopefully there's some more seats left. We also do these projects, and I've done projects with firms like Truist and Wells Fargo, Toyota Financial. And the real advantage to the company and to the student is the students for the first time often get to see what it's like in the real world and not in academia. And the companies get to evaluate talent and get to work with students in a one-on-one fashion, and it's fantastic. And the other thing, particularly for my course, we have 5 core courses that I can talk about later, but for my course in particular, we have a lot of speakers come in, and Glen, you were one of those speakers. And as an online class, we record that. And because FinTech changes so rapidly, sometimes I wish people like Kristin would be less innovative, so I won't have to work so hard. But because things change so rapidly, we change the material all the time. I've been teaching the same intro finance class for 30 years, not quite that long, but it's been the same forever. My Foundations of FinTech course changes every semester.
I'm guessing there's probably not even a textbook. You're probably just collecting articles so you can keep it fresh, right?
Oh yeah, there's nothing even close to a textbook for me. And, when Janet Yellen spoke about, regulating cryptocurrencies or stablecoin, when the Fed put out their central bank digital currency white paper, okay, we got to change everything we're doing in this topic, and we got to go to this. So I don't have a good schedule in my class. It frustrates some students, but the fun part is I don't know what I'm going to teach in September yet.
I was going to say, you can't even have a syllabus almost. It's current events.
My syllabus says subject to change in bold. But that's what makes it fun, right? I mean, if it's the same thing every semester, it gets boring. And like I'm teaching class after this call, and I'm still thinking about, well, what should I do? Because I'm not doing the exact same thing I did last semester.
Now, you're technically affiliated with Georgia State, but one of the things I think is really cool about the academy is it covers, what's the number of universities across Georgia that are actually plugged into this?
We are 20 plus. So I may have the number slightly off. I have 26.
I thought it was 26. That's what I remember.
Institutions in the University System of Georgia. They're all eligible to send students. I have students usually from 6 or 7 different institutions. Yeah, I'm at Georgia State. We have Kennesaw, West Georgia, North Georgia, Clayton State, Savannah State, Valdosta State. They're all over the state, and so it's an online course. And I do broadcast from a facility that has 27 55-inch screen TVs and a camera that tracks me. So it gives the feel that the students are really in the classroom.
You do have some in-person students, or is it a fully virtual experience?
So we do have, there's a Georgia State only version of the course because we get overloaded with the e-campus is what it's called. So that can be just in person occasionally. This semester it is, but it varies.
Got it. It's probably a question for everybody, but probably more for Jonathan and Kristin. I mean, when you talk about the coursework and things, and Kristin, you mentioned specifically that you do not come from a tech background. I often think about, I think most people, when they think about fintech, they almost think more about tech fin. It's like the tech comes first and the financial comes second. What's your perspective on the balance, striking the balance between the two? I don't know if you're more equipping students for the, the concepts as opposed to the coding, Jonathan, and Kristin, just the way you came at things. I'm curious how you kind of balance those two out.
So I'll go real short and I'll let Kristin take it. So this viewpoint is G.K. Chesterton talked about a fence. He said, you shouldn't tear down the fence until you know why the fence is there. And then once you can tell me what it's doing there, then you can tell me, okay, I want to replace it with something else. So I teach the foundations course, and we have a heavy emphasis on the fin part. So they know exactly what we're trying to do. And now we understand what the financial services are attempting to do. Here's some different technologies from blockchain to AI to machine learning. Now you can start to apply that. And that mainly comes from the other courses like the financial technologies course or the info security course or the 4 payments courses that we have. So I'm personally more of a fin emphasis. Some other courses are more of a tech emphasis.
Good balance. What about you, Kristin?
I don't know if this is going to be surprising to people, but I'm always business first, tech comes second, like 100%. Any entrepreneur, anyone thinking about starting a business that thinks the tech comes first, they're not the ones typically that should be solving that problem. So the reason I love non-technical founders so much is a lot of times these founders come from working within an industry or really going through something personally where they understand a different solution that just so happens to be a product that is technical. And so when I work with early stage entrepreneurs, it's really, what problem are you solving? And is that a pain point enough that people are going to pay to solve it? And from there, you start really diving into, okay, what exists already? Has someone tried it before? Has it failed? Why? And then start talking to customers on what that ideal solution is. And then once you really understand what the problem is and how you want to solve it, that's when you start looking at how tech can enable that solution. So 100% on the same page as you, Jonathan. Fin definitely comes before tech. And I would say that is true of most of these industries, right? You've got InsurTech, you've got MarTech, right? Marketing comes before the tech. Insurance comes before the tech. A lot of these industries, tech's the enabler, but it always comes down to what's the beginning of that, tech phrase. That's the importance, and that's where they should start.
I guess some of it probably comes from the incredible appetite for tech talent. So fintech is fighting in the broader tech pool, and you can teach the person the fin side. And you can always hire people from the tech side too, if you're coming at it from the other side. Jagruti, BitPay was started by 2 Georgia Tech grads, if I'm not mistaken. And maybe if you can say a bit about how, I'm sure you know the origin story. How did they come about this opportunity?
Yeah, I know. So both our founders, one has a tech background, one does not have a tech background. One has more like a sales type background. And I think that's a perfect combination to start a company 11 years back and think, 15 years forward on what future of payments might look like. So really the way they came up with this idea was inspired by Bitcoin white paper. Back in 2008, I believe, or 2009 is when they read the white paper and figured that there's a real strong use case here for peer-to-peer payments and facilitating immediate instant payment, instant transactions with low cost or no cost using a cryptocurrency called Bitcoin. And I guess, Steven, our founder and CEO, he having the tech background, and Tony Calippi, more of the business kind of background, both of them put their heads together and figured, they'll start this platform where they can facilitate accepting cryptocurrency and make it easier for merchants, businesses to be able to do that. And this was 11 years back when, probably no one wanted to talk cryptocurrency or even, kind of always thought about Bitcoin being like the not good thing. Well, today, obviously that has changed a lot. But back then, really, their goal was, how can we make this easier for merchants, for businesses to start accepting? And they did that. They started about 11 years back with just Bitcoin and allowing merchants or businesses to accept Bitcoin as a form of payments. What BitPay the platform was built to kind of, make it really easy for a business's customers to be able to pay for merchandise or services in Bitcoin. BitPay would absorb all the effects, all the volatility. There's really no chargeback risk you have if you transact in Bitcoin. BitPay does what it does. We accept the crypto, we turn around, next business day, we pay the merchant back in fiat of their choice, minus a 1% standard fee that we charge. And a lot of businesses thought that was a pretty cool, not just a cool use case, because now they opened up to a whole new dynamic of a customer base that was looking to pay an alternative form of payments. So that, plus the fees, today you're probably paying 3 to 4% credit card fees. Your international wires are much higher. And then here you have, a BitPay that's charging 1%. So they've kind of combined those use cases and found that this was a lucrative space to be in. Fast forward several years, BitPay introduced Ethereum and then many other different cryptocurrencies. Today we support about 13 or 14 different cryptocurrencies, and half of them are stable coins.
So by 80-20 rule, you've probably got a good 90%, 80% at least of the market covered in terms of volume, I would think.
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, between Bitcoin and Ethereum, I think today's market cap, if you look at it, between those two cryptos, that's about 65% of total market cap. And we support both of those, plus other stable coins, which now are getting super popular given the volatility, and found another non-volatile way of making payments. So yeah, that combined with a few other coins, like for example, Doge and SHIB, we do support those kind of cryptocurrencies, kind of listening to what our businesses want, and then giving them what they want. For example, Gucci, they asked us to help support ApeCoin. Well, they asked, we did it. In a few months, we spun that out, and we kind of went live with ApeCoin that they asked for. So yeah, I mean, it's just listening to our merchants, our businesses, what do they want that will help them grow their business, and we look to support that.
So Jane, you mentioned before, I mean, by the time someone's looking to enter new markets, if we assume most of these companies actually started in Ireland, I'm guessing that maybe you're more inclined to have people kind of from the sales, partnership, marketing side that are coming here. I mean, what can you generalize on who it is that actually sets up shop, at least the people, the executives, or is it the CEO that actually comes here typically?
To be honest, I think it's quite mixed. So it kind of depends on what they're like. Generally speaking, for an Irish company, particularly in financial services or fintech, America is not the first market that they go to. It's just far too big. So I think generally speaking, you'd find somebody, we would have a whole development pipeline. So from, 3 people companies all the way up, they worked with our local enterprise offices, and then they would be absorbed into Enterprise Ireland. And then we would support them with a development advisor in Ireland first, who kind of manages all of the grants, funding, development programs, that kind of side of it, to support them and make sure that their business is actually, a functioning business in Ireland. And then we would put them out to the international market. So we'd have 46 international locations. So the UK is typically a first start for many companies. Australia is another big one. So Fineos is actually on the Australian Stock Exchange. It's a public company there. And then when they're coming to the US, it's quite split. So sometimes you have the CEO will up sticks, move their whole life over and, settle into, say, the likes of Atlanta, and start to build a business from there. And then other times you might find that they hire a business development representative a couple of months before, like when they're kind of getting integrated into the market, first of all. In terms of their profile, I think I'm trying to mentally run through the portfolio at the moment and see who's in there. There's a lot of people who come from a heavy financial background. So there's a lot of founders who worked in some of the major tier 1 banks in Ireland for many years as either, like, say, in the mortgage department, or they might have been in a consulting firm. There are a lot of people like that. And then they come together maybe with a product builder or whoever it is, and they develop a tech solution, essentially, like, so a tech solution to a financial problem, to be honest.
Yeah.
And that's probably the key. That's probably the most common mix, I think, that you see. It's a lot of collaboration. I haven't seen too many people where it's one founder on their own. Well, I don't know. Actually, no, I have. I don't know. That's a very tough question to answer, to be honest.
It's never simple, is it? There's always a lot of different exceptions and cases out there. And right now I can think of a couple of examples, one in Atlanta and one not, of people, and Cardlytics is the Georgia example, where you had somebody, as you said, Jane, who's in the the financial services space already in a large organization, comes up. Actually, Greenlight, I think, is a similar example of this too. Is you've got somebody who comes up with a really good idea and realizes it's not even as much this is mine and I'm going to run off and do it myself. They realize that they can only take it so far within a large corporate structure, and you got to just absolutely dive into it full bore. And I think that's really how places like Greenlight and Cardlytics got going. So I think that's another model too, if you guys agree with that. The other, and that actually just reminded me, one of the characteristics, because I think that Atlanta to some extent doesn't get the same press as an Austin or a Silicon Valley or New York City sometime in terms of a tech hub. And I think that one of the reasons for that, now I'm curious what you all think, most of our companies tend to be more back office, B2B kind of oriented. We're Check Free was the company that I was at, always behind the scenes. The whole point was they were never promoting to the outside world. And I think that's true of so many global payments, FIS, Fiserv. These are all companies that aren't intended to be household names, but they're supporting the back office infrastructure to make all these things work. The reason I thought of this was Greenlight's a perfect example of somebody else, because they've actually got a big television marketing campaign, because the point is they're trying to create that trust and have that recognition that people know their name. Any thoughts on that? I mean, what do you, all of you, what do you kind of hear about the status of Georgia, relative, or Atlanta specifically, relative to other areas as a fintech hub?
I would chime in specifically just on the general startup front. It's going to be mostly where the investment money is coming from. So it's really what the makeup of local investors is. Here in Atlanta, you tend to see a lot more funds wanting B2B and staying away from B2C, business to consumer, where you do see a lot of business to consumer type companies in the Bay Area, for example. That's because in the Bay Area, there are a lot of investors who love B2C models, right? And so even if a startup, say, is a B2C model and they start here in Atlanta, if they are going forward raising money and they happen to raise a big round from a top tier Silicon Valley investor because they love B2C models, that business may sometimes relocate to San Francisco, which is what we mostly saw pre-pandemic. Post-pandemic, now it's not as important for you to be in the same city and space as your investor, but still it does kind of help, especially with face-to-face coming back, right? So sometimes it is easier that way. So I would say mostly it's that investment makeup of why you see that shift.
It's interesting. And I can't recall if they were a B2B company, but kind of a counterpoint to that is I remember one story of a company that got a bunch of investment money from Austin. They were already an Atlanta-based company. And the investor kind of started saying, yeah, when are you going to come to Austin? And the person kind of slow rolled it a little bit. And then after about 6 months, the investor kind of went, oh, I get it. You've got everything you need there. And then they didn't wind up going. So it's the same kind of logic. And Jagruti, I think, BitPay, I don't think you're really, well, you do have a customer facing, card. I don't know to what extent you're looking to establish BitPay as a consumer brand versus a trusted entity for the behind the scenes processing.
Yeah, a great question. So we actually introduced our first consumer product 5 or 6 years back with the prepaid debit card, where you can load the prepaid debit card with crypto and be able to use a prepaid debit card, I guess, anywhere, almost instantaneously as soon as crypto is loaded on that card. We had initially a co-branded card with Visa, and now it's a co-branded card with MasterCard. Since then, I would say maybe past couple of years or so, we have been, I guess, pushing hard on use of our app. And then not a lot of people know about, BitPay's app. We have a BitPay app where consumers can buy crypto, you can swap crypto, you can send crypto. It's a growing piece of our business, something that we have recently started focusing more on, because we do understand that consumers, at the end of the day, we can be B2B all we want, but to reach to that end consumer market, you have to tap into the consumer side. And the best way to do that is make it very easy for them. It's the app. So yeah, I mean, we kind of introduced those products, and we don't make heavy splash from a marketing side. Like,
I was going to say, it's a lot of money to build a consumer brand. I mean, you're doing it word of mouth, social media.
Yeah, and also, I don't know if you guys have been following, but there are crypto companies out there, who have made the news with tons of investment, or I guess marketing dollars that they have spent. One of the crypto companies spent about $700 million in renaming a stadium, and we don't do those we don't do those kind of things. We spend where we think we want to spend.
Well, they called it the Crypto Bowl this last Super Bowl because there were so many advertisements for these companies.
Well, there you go. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, we definitely think there is, from a crypto side, the best way to get the adoption or awareness or education to consumer is getting them to use it in the most simplest fashion, and educating them on how they can do that.
Jonathan, we had a comment that came in, and it's a student that took your course last semester. So I don't think she really has any benefit of trying to butter you up. I don't think you can give her anything else. But she said how much she enjoyed the real world perspective that your course gave. So I think that's a great compliment right there.
I would say that's not a student. That is one of my very best students. So, and I do need to send her an email. So Astrid, shoot me an email real quick, please.
I wanted to follow up though, in terms of real world perspective. You talked a little bit already, but if you could elaborate, I think that the experiential learning, the fact that you actually have a whole bunch of, I'm assuming primarily local companies who actually put these students through, they give them a task and say, how would you solve this? I think that's a really great feature of the program.
Well, yeah, FIS has been one of the biggest supporters. And they're not all local, and we had Toya Financial Services based in Dallas. We have this semester locally Truist. It's a lot of fun, and what they do is they give a challenge statement, then they provide mentors, and the students work on the challenge statement in teams, and the teams meet with the mentors a set number of times. Then there's an initial round of the presentations, and Tommy Marshall and I select the winners, and the winners go, there are usually 3 teams that present to a panel, the company, and then the winner is declared.
Is this part of one of the courses, or is this kind of an extracurricular?
It's part of the course.
Okay.
So in UL Solutions, we did this summer. So in order to get an A in the course, you have to satisfactorily complete this requirement.
That's really cool. I like that a lot.
And this,
go ahead.
Go ahead, Glenn.
I was just going to say, we had another question come in. I think this one would be for everybody. What are the biggest, what is the biggest challenge, I guess is a way to put it, facing Georgia fintech companies? Is it the funding levels? The ability to attract funding? Is it the tech talent? Is it fighting through the economy? And this person gave you an app so you could choose all of the above, which I hope you don't, because that defeats the purpose.
I'm going to plug the ecosystem report here, Glenn, and say that I did a whole article kind of explaining the different tiers of startups and how you can look at fintech startups, because the needs are all different. I would say overall, all of the above for any startup, but particularly if you're looking at someone just getting off the ground, the most important thing that they need is feedback from this community. So as I was talking about looking at a problem, how you're going to solve it, and starting to talk to customers, sometimes it's really hard to have those conversations with customers if you're not keyed into a network. And so by being a mentor at ATDC, which I see Red on the call, so reach out to him if you're interested, or by attending events where startups are, being mentors or being that source of feedback for these early stage companies is is so amazing and something simple that everyone can do to help them define, am I solving the problem? And then as far as funding, talent, economy, I mean, fintech is something that really controls our day to day. So even when COVID happened, you didn't really see the economy affecting fintech companies from raising. But I would say, yeah, funding is always something, a key challenge of startups is getting that initial funding, proving that they have that something of value to get initial funding. And then Glenn, you were even talking about, hey, it's really fun looking at the rounds of 2 to 3 million. That's even far along, right? Companies go through this whole process that we don't even hear about or know up until they're even visible at that stage. That's more of a Series A company. That's going a couple of steps ahead. So look at the ecosystem report and also just give back in the community by helping these startups, particularly in things that you can do while as providing feedback and mentorship.
A couple follow-ups on that. I know there's a group called Atlanta Tech Angels in town as well. That can be a source of, like you say, it might be the $75,000 check or something like that to really kind of give you that motivation to kind of at least get the project to the next level. And in terms of the feedback too, one of our partners, Fintech Atlanta, does a really cool program called Run It by the Buyers. I know they've got one coming up on September 15th. And I'm sure if you look up Fintech Atlanta, you can find some details on that. And they convene, again, when we talk about B2B, a lot of the buyers in this case are banks or insurance companies, other financial services companies, and companies of different sizes. They might be a little further along with a new product, or they might be a young company, get up there and kind of talk about what they've got, and they get pretty frank feedback in terms of whether it kind of hits the mark and I think this used to start in a relatively kind of almost like conference table kind of setting, but it's now, a bigger number of people who are there. I didn't want to stop anybody else from adding in the thoughts on what the biggest challenges are. Jagruti, Jane?
I think I'll just add one thing, which is probably not in the categories mentioned here. And this is maybe more specific to blockchain companies. The pace of innovation and the disruption it can cause and how fast you have to adjust to what's going to happen next, right? I mean, it's like pivoting as soon as you can kind of thing. And it kind of follows, what disruptive technology is out there. And that's a combination of many things. I think it's the needs of consumer, what consumer today is looking to do, right? And then two, just the industry in general, like where is it headed? So I think a combination of all of that and deciding how fast you can pivot and where you need to pivot could be another challenge.
Jane, obviously, I know folks like Wayflyer didn't have any problem raising capital given the number that they came up with. Do you know, is the talent hub a big attraction in terms of why they come here? How do you, how do you assess those categories?
I think, to be honest, we've a couple of companies, I suppose, very, very different scales. So like one company I know who are trying to set up shop in Atlanta over the next couple of months would be Keeper Solutions. And there are a couple of people I see in the attendees who would have been very supportive and have met the team from Keeper. So they were over for FinTech South. But I think the biggest challenge for us, because we're bringing Irish companies over at the smaller side, is getting a presence or an identity or a kind of a customer base in the US, because excuse me, they don't have a network here, and they don't, if they're doing well with an Irish bank, just the scale of our country, like we're 4.5 million people, the Irish bank is only really going to be the size of a community bank here. So sometimes it can be trying to get that first customer on the board, and once you get that, then you can tip along. So the split between fintech and the traditional financial services, and I think Kristin referenced it earlier, it was actually referenced as well in FinTech South that one of the discussions was how to kind of bridge the gap between the fintechs and the traditional financial institutions, and what, like, the fact that sometimes they're threatened one by the other and feel like one's trying to replace the other, when really what you actually need is collaboration between the two. So that's something I think that we find as a challenge for the companies coming over. On the larger scale for companies, I suppose it is talent. Like we had a company, Global Shares. It hasn't been a problem in Atlanta, to be honest, but it was yeah, it was a really good session at FinTech Site. It hasn't been a problem in Atlanta in terms of talent. Like if anything, it's probably been a draw, but we've had companies who've moved from other locations in the US and relocated to Toronto because they found it easier to find talent there. So I think it's very mixed, and the scale of our companies it's just so vast. It's hard to put it down to one thing, but I think for the most part, recently, it's been the traditional financial institutions and the length of the deals and how long it takes to secure a deal when we have companies who are so small and trying to get that first contract over the line, and the cost of doing that from somewhere else.
Makes sense. Jonathan, the FinTech Academy is kind of only reaching scale, I think I would say. I forget how many years you've been going, but do you have any kind of pattern yet that you've seen? Do the graduates tend to look for opportunities with the bigger FinTech firms, the younger kind of growing, or do they literally go off and kind of start their own projects?
So yeah, we are just getting the scale. We really started in the fall of 2019. So spring of 2020 was when we really kind of launched, and then everything blew up, of course, in February, March. Most of my students don't know what they want to do. I have some grad students, I have a grad student on the call that they know more what they want to do, but the undergrads have never heard of FIS or Fiserv, and they've only heard of, the companies that are consumer brands. We have one of my students started Ethiopay. He's from Ethiopia, so he started his own business. So we have a mix, but primarily it's students trying to figure out where they should be and what the opportunity set is, which is why I always plug, if anybody wants to come speak in my class, I always love to have them.
And the evening program that you've got to give people exposure to all these companies, I think is a great way to do that as well. And this is kind of one for everybody on the panel too. I've said it before, more specifically about payments, but I think it applies to FinTech as well. When I got involved in this space, I always said, nobody ever says, when I grow up, I want to do payments. It just wasn't a thing. But more and more as time goes on, FinTech has become more of a common term where people might, even if they don't know the companies, they might actually look to get into this space. Is that, Jagruti, you had to be in the audit world for a while before you kind of started looking into blockchain. Maybe, I don't know how far blockchain was along when you first started, but what do you think? Do you think that people are actually actively looking at this point to get involved in FinTech, or do we still have a sell job to do?
I guess it depends on, I think it depends on, just what they're exactly looking for. And I don't think payments, this is just my personal opinion, I don't know if payments comes to mind kind of, graduating from school or right out of school, right? And then a lot of it, I think, has to probably do with the nuances in just pure payments. There's a lot that goes into it. It's like, I come from the accounting side of the world, right? Back where I studied, no one taught me the importance of compliance, or I didn't know what BSA AML was, and those kind of money transmitter licenses. Had no idea what that even meant till I actually got working with companies. So a lot of what I learned actually came from working with companies and learning from them. Had I known that back when I didn't even know what I wanted to do with my career, I think I would have made a decision very early on that payments is really what I want to do. So I don't know, I kind of feel like, there are probably a few things that people who are interested in payments would need to do before they can make the decision if they want to be in payments.
Mm-hmm. Kristin, you're actually convening cohorts of, FinTech doesn't necessarily mean payments. I don't even know that you're necessarily confined to FinTech. It's tech is in the name. Do you find a kind of a common thread in terms of where your entrepreneur founders are coming from, or how they actually, are inspired to pursue an idea like this?
Yeah, it's really interesting too, because it started off being a theory that I had while at ATDC, and as really kind of come into, I have data to support it now. Most of the founders that I work with come from the industry in some fashion, right? So right now I have a hairstylist building an app for hairstylists, right? I've got a nurse who's building something for postpartum depression. They experience some sort of pain point where there's not a solution either to solve it for themselves, or they're in an industry where there's no tech at all, like being a hairstylist, right? And so they're really coming to it saying, I've got an idea for a solution. I'm just not sure how to do it. And I help empower them to do it. And again, it comes down to the business, not necessarily the technology. So I was giggling a little bit when we were talking about this topic, because you think about it, like, what do you want to be when you grow up? I was a psychology major, right? I'm sure a lot of us went to school for something that is totally not what we're in now. And a lot of times it's just our personal journeys that lead us into that. So I don't think specifically fintech or payments. They think more the brand or the company, or technology may be a factor there. But I love programs like the Georgia Fintech Academy, where it's putting the students in and placing them within some of the larger organizations here locally, so that they can find out they're interested in that. Because I think a lot of us don't really know. And so being able to do these experiential programs where you see really what it is and get an inside view is just so valuable for these students that are coming out into the workforce.
Let me add one thing to that. A lot of my students are experiencing those pain points, like you mentioned, Kristin. I have students from all over the world. I have students, when we talk about unbanked, they come from families that are unbanked. And so they know the problem, from a very personal standpoint, can give you really good answers, and they get excited when they say, oh, maybe there's a tech solution. So that makes it very rewarding.
Another company comes to mind from our own ecosystem is Coins, spelled with a Q. Again, two founders who actually came from backgrounds where they had exactly those pain points. So I think that makes sense. We've had a couple of questions that we fielded along the way. I know we're coming up a little bit toward the top of the hour. So if anybody else says anything, I've got plenty more that I can ask, but if anybody's got anything that they want to make sure they get on the table, now's your chance. Let me ask, I mentioned early on the idea that we've got, several major companies, and some that, don't even necessarily always qualify as fintech, like Intel and Microsoft, that have made announcements that they're expanding their presence to really pull tech talent. It's kind of, an artificial distinction to call it fintech talent. It's kind of all one and the same. Any perspectives? Is it great that that's just bringing more visibility? Or some people going, oh man, now I got to fight that much harder to find the resources that I need to kind of keep my business running? Any thoughts about where that's going to lead us over the course of the next 5 years? Not everybody wants.
It's really hard for early stage startups
Yeah.
to compete with that, right? So if there's an early stage startup that's, just getting by, doesn't have a lot of money to spend, if there's a developer that's fresh out of college looking at Microsoft, or your little startup, they're probably going to make a lot more money at Microsoft. So it's making it a little bit more difficult for early stage, but I think the visibility is good from a funding standpoint. So it's a give or take, I would say, in that.
We've always got that risk averse versus risk lover kind of thing going on too, because, you have to go back quite a way now to think about all the Microsoft millionaires that rode that stock up from the early days. The bottom line is, nothing against Microsoft, but you're probably not going to get rich on stock options from Microsoft. They're a mature company now, whereas you may not get much of a paycheck right now, but if you get into the ground floor of some of these young companies, and then the beauty of that is once you do that, then you're in the position to fund the next young company, which is what I really like about kind of the virtuous cycle of our ecosystem.
I think coming from the Irish perspective, and speaking almost as the sister agency at this stage, we've done really, really well by having the likes of Intel and Microsoft who've been in Ireland for years and years. It's from a university point of view, it's really benefited us. And a lot of our programs throughout college we've been very fortunate to be able to develop a very highly skilled workforce, and I suppose our students are very well prepped. I'm not sure how it all ties in, but I know it coincides with the arrival of Intel and Microsoft and all the huge multinationals into Ireland. It's basically massively upskilled our workforce, and it's been a very positive thing for the island the island, I suppose, as a whole country. So I suppose for the ecosystem in Atlanta, there's still a lot of benefits I'd imagine that you could still get in terms of your local youth and students and the university side of things and the workforce. It's a massive positive that we've seen, even though obviously incumbents, and I think it also helps smaller businesses around in the sense that the competition is right there, but also so is the collaboration, and so is the all the spin-offs, and people spin off from Microsoft, Intel, and create their own. So
great. Well, we're at the top of the hour. Any last, did we miss anything in terms of the insights that you can kind of pull from either the ecosystem report or the ecosystem overall that we just want to get on the table really quickly? Because this is being recorded, so we can always go back and people can hear it later. Any categories that are worthy of, further drill down later on? Just you want to get on the table?
Well, I'll just say one quick thing, Glenn. I know we briefly spoke about it. There are companies, crypto companies, who are going public a lot more. Right, Coinbase went public in 2021. Robinhood did that. They're not crypto 100%, but they have been in that space. Lately, we just saw the news on Bitcoin Depot, a local company here based in Georgia.
We didn't get to that. You actually have a background with them too, which is fascinating.
Yeah, so I just wanted to highlight, I think and Georgia is setting the trend. This is the second crypto company going public via SPAC, right? So I guess all that to say that, crypto is not mainstream yet, but, a lot of these companies are setting the trends. I think things are going in the right direction.
I'm blanking. I know you mentioned that it's the second Atlanta payments.
Backed is the first.
Backed one by SPAC. That's right. There was another one that I think is kind of a quasi SPAC as well. I'd forgotten about them. So again,
just wanted to highlight that.
Wonderful. Anything else?
This went by so fast. I could sit here and talk with you guys for like another hour.
I would love to.
I'm like, we didn't get to everything.
Well, let's do it again. And I saw Jessica just put just another reminder. One way to continue this conversation. I hope we will all be there, and hopefully a lot of the audience will as well at the Welcome to Atlanta Mixer in Midtown at the Nelson Mullins in Atlantic Station. Nice rooftop deck. That's on the 28th at 6 p.m. So the link is in the chat, or I'm sure you'll be hearing about it because we're not doing our job if you don't get another chance to find out. But again, early bird pricing expires on Friday. Jane, Jagruti, Kristin, Jonathan, thanks so much. And thanks to everybody for joining us.
Thank you, Glenn.
Thank you
so much.
Thanks, everyone.